Okay, so now we're going to move on into what becomes the final phase of the project, and that's actually getting it all together and putting it into the computer. Because the point of this is not to have a flat object or a flat design that's all dimensioned. That's kind of cool, but we want to get it onto the computer. So what we're going to do is log into TinkerCAD, and the first thing you need to do is go to Design and then Properties. And now that I'm here, I'm going to put my name and quadruped. Quadruped. It's not a pet, right? It's not. A lot of people have been spelling it with P-E-T. It's not. It's P-E-D, and that is from Greek or the Greek or Latin root of ped, which is foot. Quadruped. It means 4 feet. So a lot of kids have been turning that in with quadruped. Like, you know, it's an animal, so it's your pet, but that's not what it is. Okay, now, since our drawing, if we look at our drawings, they're from a straight side angle, like as if you're looking across the ground. So first thing you need to do is go up here to the settings. Let me fix this projector. There we go. Go up here to the settings, or to the view, and I'm going to put it down to a sideways view. And this is going to help us. You have to switch back and forth quite a bit today between these views. But generally, you're either going to be here on this side view, and I like using my right mouse button to get it exactly where I want. This is going to be important today so that we can get this accurately lined up. Whenever you're lining up stuff vertically up and down, you need to have in this view. When you're lining it up at the first, you probably need to have this view. And it's easy to just hold down the right mouse button and get that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to close all these other things. Probably the only thing we're going to need today is geometric. And these are primitives. Okay, I'm going to start off with this 50 by 61. And it's a rectangle. Okay, so really quickly, I'm just going to drag out a rectangle. Now, for this rectangle, this is the main part of the lion's body. Or actually, no, it's the smaller part of the lion's body. So first of all, if we look on here, it's 61 millimeters tall. So I'm going to grab the white dot on top and drag it up until it says 61. And people, don't worry about it. Remember on the keychain assignment, there was a maximum size of 50 millimeters? On this one, I don't want you to worry about the size of it because I will resize it when you turn it in to me and print it at a size that we can deal with. Because here's why I don't do that. I don't want you to have to worry about scaling it when you're inputting it. You've already done the hard work of measuring it, and I want you to build it on here exactly the same size it is on your paper, and then when you turn it in, I will take care of the size of it for you, okay? So you don't have to worry about any of that. And how I determine that size is when I put them out there, I look at everybody's and try to make them about the same size. But since these animals are such weird and different shapes from one another, you know, I can't always get it perfect. Okay, the other dimension for this rectangle was 50. So I'm going to stretch this to 50. See, this is why we took all that time to measure things. Now guess what? This rectangle isn't exactly square. It's actually, if you look at the drawing right here, it's slightly tilted. So I'm going to lift it up in the air somewhere. Hey, that might not be perfect, and later when we do the legs, I might have to move it up or down. I'm going to move it down a little bit. But that's fine for now. You can always adjust stuff later. Okay, so now look, one thing we don't know from our drawing, if you look at it, our drawing doesn't show the top of my lion, does it? This is where your personal artist touch is going to probably come in. You're going to have to figure out, well, how wide do I think the lion is going to be there? So this is where you have to make a judgment call. I'm going to actually just take mine, and I know that if the lion's not that skinny probably for that part of the body, I'm going to actually stretch that out. I'm just going to go with 50 for now, and if I have to change that later, that's fine. Okay, so now we have 61 and 50. So let's move on to the next piece. The next piece I want to do is this hip, this big, huge hip in the back. So for this, we're going to use, I feel like I'm going to use a sphere. Now, on mine, the hip is 71 across and 68 tall. So I'm going to go up to 68. Whoops. And go over to 71. This is where all the hard work of measuring, and I know that was kind of annoying, but most of you guys did a great job on that. This is where it comes into play. Now look, if I made the body about that wide, I think that hip muscle is going to take up, or that hip bone or hip structure should take up that. Now, listen, this is where it's important to look. If we look at this drawing here, you can kind of see that this hip starts at about the middle of this hip is going to start right where the end of that red box is. So I'm going to move this up, and if I look at my drawing, the hip actually goes up slightly above. You have to look at these details. The hip actually gets elevated up slightly above, probably by about 2 or 3 millimeters. I'd say something like that. Looks about right to me. And is it lined up with the middle? Yeah, look at that. It's pretty perfect. You know what? I'm going to go with that. Now listen, if you get done with putting this together and it doesn't look right, this is your project. And you can kind of make little adjustments. Like, hey, you know what? The drawing says this, but guess what? I'm in charge of this. This is my project. And if I want to move it a millimeter here or a millimeter there because it looks better to me, I'm going to do that. No problem. Okay, so now we're done with the hip. I'm going to go down, and we're working our way down, and I'm going to now go to this shape. And over here, it's dimensioned at 61 by 43. Another sphere. And that was, yeah, 61 by 43. And really pay attention to details in the drawing. It'll really help out in the long run. Now listen, this is definitely going to be, the leg is going to be much more skinny than that big wide hip. So this was what, 41? I'm going to stop this right around 31, something like that. I don't know. Just, it looks like a good guess. And remember, we don't have that to go by, so we have to kind of take a guess there at what's going to look right. We can adjust, we can readjust, no problem. Okay? Okay, so let's go here. Now let's look at this. If you look at my drawing, this doesn't start at halfway. It starts above halfway. So I'm going to lift this thing up. Oh, first of all, we got to rotate it. Now this is important. For this part, I'm going to record my screen with this device. Hopefully it shows up on here. Okay, so for this part, we're going to hold the drawing up right next to the screen. And I'm going to keep doing this and look at it right next to it on the screen. And then from that, I could probably get an idea of what the angle should be. So I'm going to keep doing it. I'm just going to guess and check here. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to full screen. Uh-oh. Oops, something happened. Okay, there we go. Undo that. Okay, so I'm going to go to full screen, and I'm going to rotate it with my eyes just as a guide. And it looks like it's at about that angle. Now I'm going to hold the paper up. So now I'm going to hold the paper up right next to the screen. And you see the angle on that shape, it looks about right. And so that's how you can kind of gauge the angle of it to get that right. Okay, this is definitely all the way inside of this other one. So I'm moving my arrow keys. It needs to stick out slightly, but not too much. And you just kind of adjust stuff until it looks about right. You know what? I feel like it needs to go down just a touch. There we go. Now, hey, one thing you notice, guys, the teacher, even me, I took probably, what, 10 different attempts to get that like I wanted. I kept moving it around until it looked right. That's where your artistic touch comes into this, okay? So there is, I think, a certain element of art to this assignment. Okay, so let's go to the next part, which is this other part of the leg, and I'm going to put out another sphere, because in my opinion, that looked more like a sphere. You know, it's up to you. If you have something else, you should use the appropriate shape that you drew. So if you use rectangles, put out a rectangle. Okay, and this is 24. You can see already I probably didn't lift everything up enough, did I? So I'm going to rotate this, and again, hold it up to the screen if you have to. Not quite enough. By the way, if you rotate on the inside, it's not going to do what you want it to do. For this one, you're probably going to have to put your mouse on the outside of this wheel so that it spins more accurately to exactly your position. Sometimes keeping on the inside is very useful, but for this assignment, okay, I feel like my leg's getting a little wide there, so I'm going to bring that in a bit. And I feel like it's up too far. Maybe not forward enough. And, oh, there we go. That's starting to look about right. Okay, cool. The next one is the ankle. And the ankle is going to be 36 by 13. Again, I'm just taking these stats from my data that's on the sheet. Again, that's why we kind of spent a lot of time doing this. And you know what? This needs to be skinnier. The ankle is where, your legs tapers as it gets lower. Tapering means it gets skinnier or smaller as it goes down the leg. So we're going to take that, and then we need to rotate it. That looks about the right angle. And move it forward. Move it over. And we'll move it up. And the last one is the paw. I also use this now. Hey, if you use a sphere for the paw, you're actually going to have to cut it flat at the end so that it prints right. But we'll do that at the very end. We'll do that later. So I'll use 14. And again, I'm going 14 by 24 because that's what I dimensioned it at with the digital caliper the other day. And the foot might be a little wider than the ankle, just slightly. How wide did I make that one? 18. So I'm going to go with 20 on this. And that was I'm sorry, I said the foot. Actually, for a lion, it's called a paw, right? I think that's true. Okay, so there we go. Now we have basically, and you know what? I feel like this needs to be rotated just slightly. In the drawing, it was slightly bent down just a little bit. Whoops. See, just a bit. And I'm done with that. I don't like this. Now I look at it. I feel like this part needs to be over a bit, so I click it and move it. Hey, by the way, you can move a bunch of stuff at once without grouping it just by grabbing it all at once. You don't have to group it. You can if you want to. There's nothing wrong with grouping, but if you group and group and group, your drawing gets very convoluted and it's difficult to handle, and it won't load as quickly either. So be careful. Grouping is good. Hey, another thing you can do is if you get a shape in place, you can lock it where it's at. If you don't want this to move ever, you're like, hey, I'm really happy with this one. You can lock it right where it's at. You can unlock them anytime by clicking on them like this. You can grab, let's say that you only want to grab two shapes instead of grabbing them all like I was doing. You can click one and hold down shift and click another. Now you've just grabbed those two shapes if you want to group them. Okay? I'm going to have you guys start on this one today. Hey, remember, don't go around and do the same thing on the other side. Why? I want to show you why. This is pretty important. I'm going to grab everything and hold down shift to get rid of the red box and click on it. So now I have everything except for the red box, which is good because I don't want to copy the body. I just want the legs. Now watch what I do. If I group these, and then you go to edit and duplicate. Don't go to design and duplicate. Edit and duplicate. Okay? And then you use your arrows. I really have a copy. I just had to move it over, right? And then look what happens. You go up here to adjust, and you can see this one. It's hard to see on the projector. Mirror. And watch what happens. You can flip it. Nope, that's not the way. That's it. And now, you see why I didn't want you to dimension the other side? Isn't that a cool trick? And then obviously animals don't always sit perfectly symmetrically. So when you're over here, you could take this one now and rotate it so his leg goes back a little bit. Or her leg goes back a little bit. I don't know. Right? And you can switch it. You guys, this is why I love this project. And now the problem is this lens off the ground, so I can double click to go into the group now, and I can change some angles. See, there's no reason to redo everything when you have the basics of it already done here. And you can edit this one just a little bit. And I'm going to move this down a little bit on the ankle. And who cares if it matches your drawing? If it looks awesome, don't worry about it. But notice what I do have everywhere, people. Overlap. I cannot stress enough how important it is that every shape overlaps each other. Because when you're done, guess what TinkerCAD does? TinkerCAD puts it in a group anyhow and makes it into one solid shape. And if you have another thing that's over here that's not connected, it's gonna print out separately, okay? Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm gonna lay out your drawings on the table, and you can get started as soon as you get back to your seat.